Welcome to the program now, Scott Peyton, State Director of Right on Crime in Mississippi. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Gilbert. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. So several bills are making their way through the legislature, and first we should probably pass on that Governor Tate Reeves has declared that April is Second Chance Month here in the state of Mississippi. I'm not aware that he's ever made such a proclamation, or has any governor in the past. So how important is this to call attention to this issue?
Second Chances Month is very important, Gerard. If you look at the history of Second Chance Month, it comes from Prison Fellowship to honor Chuck Colson, their founder, who passed away in April of 2012. But as Christians, we also realize April typically is the month that follows Easter. And, you know, what better describes what happened from Good Friday to Easter, the darkness that occurred, and then the hope and the joy that comes with the resurrection. So Second Chance Month corresponds also with Easter, with the resurrection as Christians. Is that hope and joy that we find, knowing that there is something that we live for that's greater. There's hope that keeps us moving forward in our daily routine lives. And the same can be said for those that have made bad mistakes, horrible mistakes, that they have that opportunity at some point in their lives after they paid or incurred the consequences of that action. There should be a time for them to be looked at again, to give that another opportunity to function in society.
So, Scott, the thing that always comes up in any time we talk about this issue is there's concern on the part of the public that folks who have committed the most heinous crimes and are indeed a menace to society should remain incarcerated and should not receive these so-called second chances and be released, that they likely would go out into be released back in as a free person and commit further crime, hurt people, take their stuff, what have you. How do you distinguish and discern there, just so people understand what we're trying to do with these reforms?
Sure. First off, I firmly believe that prison is necessary, and there are people that belong in prison. There are some people that probably should never be released from prison due to the nature of the crimes that they committed. And if you look at SB 2795, is kind of what we're talking about in parole. There are certain offenses that are excluded: drug trafficking, human trafficking, capital murder, first and second degree murder, sex offenses. There will be some crimes at sentencing where the judge can look at the particular circumstances and deem that offense cannot be eligible for parole. And then people that were sentenced under habitual sentencing laws, someone that continues to break the law, and not just minor infractions, but serious infractions over and over. Those would not get the opportunity to be reviewed. And I think the first thing, Gerard, that we have to keep in mind is that this is just eligibility. This doesn't mean that an individual is going to be automatically released. I have spoken with and met with Mr. Belk, the parole board director, on many occasions, and I guarantee you, since day one until recently, he has been working diligently to improve upon the parole process, to make sure that people are given, one, a fair hearing, but also to make sure that they've met all the criteria to even be eligible to come before his board. And after meeting with him, I am fairly certain that he does a thorough vetting process as required by the law on these individuals that come up for parole hearings before his board.
So, Scott, what's a typical scenario? So talk about someone who, based on the laws in the state of Mississippi, perhaps is locked up, is incarcerated, but perhaps there are better approaches to reintegrate them into society and give them the opportunity to be productive members of our state. What's the scenario there that precludes them from being released, and really they're just kind of wilting in prison and not producing anything where they could be?
Yeah, Gerard, we have, and it's not, the number of people in prison should be based on the people that are convicted and being sent over. But when we look at the statistics and the studies that show that nonviolent offenders, actually the longer they spend in prison, can increase their chances of recidivism. It can make them better criminals, and increase the opportunity that they're going to come back. But those are the individuals that we can safely release back into society under the supervision of a parole officer that's going to continue working with them to address those root causes that sent them to prison in the first place. We've based our, there's been some research that showed it took 5,000 individuals during a time period, I think it was between 21 and 22, that were released, being eligible under SB 2795, and 98% of those individuals did not return to prison on a new sentence. So these were individuals that were released, that went through that are still probably going through the parole process, and they have not been returned on a new conviction, which is good news, which shows that parole can work, but it requires a lot of work. It's a community effort. As you see, MDOC has been engaging with employers. We have a labor participation rate that's one of the lowest in the nation here in Mississippi. We also know that individuals who return back to prison, the one thing they have in common is that they were unemployed. And we're not just talking a small time job, but they need employment that's going to be able to earn a living. And those are some of the benefits, in addition to reducing the prison population, is we can help to grow Mississippi's economy by putting people to work. And when you have a job, you're able to support your family. You have something to lose, and you have more of that hope and the joy to continue, because you begin to have things. You begin to become a return back to society and be a productive member.
So in the state, in the general fund budget, the Department of Corrections is third behind education and Medicaid. It's a very expensive line item. We seem to have crowding in our facilities, lack of honestly proper resources there. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough money. How would this address all of those constraints?
Gerard, it's a good point, because there was just a Department of Justice report back in February that highlighted some of the things you just mentioned. What parole does is, one, gives those that are eligible the incentive to behave, the incentive to participate in programs, and there's a light at the end of the tunnel where they can earn their way out. That is good for a lot of people. It's good for the safety of the individuals who are incarcerated at MDOC, but it's also great for those individuals that have to work the long shifts at MDOC. And that, the difficulties that the prison is experiencing in Mississippi isn't unique. We have shortages across the country. When someone can work at a department store and earn about the same amount of money as they can working at MDOC, it's tough. And those guards and the correctional officers can make a difference in the lives of the individuals that are inside, and work towards recidivism. But we have to have good conditions for both. The state is responsible for every person it puts in prison: their safety, their medical bills, their well-being, rehabilitation. It's a whole gamut of things. And Commissioner Kane has a lot on his plate and a lot of responsibility. But it begins with giving people an opportunity to work their way out of the prison system, and those that we can safely release. They're individuals that need to be there for a long time, and we understand that. But the incentives need to be to get those individuals out that we can spend just dollars a day instead of hundreds of dollars a day to supervise them.
Right. Well, it's an expensive endeavor, as you know, incarcerating people, and sometimes just letting them sit in a jail cell is not really rehabilitating them and getting them ready to return to society, and locking them up permanently is obviously not an option either. It just seems like we have a one-size-fits-all approach. It's not working. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, Scott, but we always appreciate you coming on the program. Enjoy the conversation. Take care, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're coming